Good afternoon. I'm very honored to be included in this panel this afternoon. I'm really grateful for Professor Yuan for inviting me to organizing this panel and inviting me to join this. Can you hear me? Oh, sorry. I can speak louder. I usually walk around, and this doesn't allow me to walk because I just stand, which is okay. Where was I? Okay. Well, I'm also very honored that Professor Li is chairing this panel. I have the highest respect for him. I'm very happy to be part of this panel. The topic of my presentation is social entrepreneurship and the quest for social value. On this subject, I'm relatively new. I have started to do research on social entrepreneurship in the past 5 years. And I'm very happy, in particular, to see Professor Dennis Young sitting in this audience over there. Dennis is one of the pioneers in the research on social entrepreneurship. And in fact, he's arguably the very first scholar to introduce, to do research in the area of social entrepreneurship back in early 1980s, I believe. But he made a critical mistake when he was doing his research. He didn't choose the right word. He used the word nonprofit entrepreneurship instead of social entrepreneurship. And so, the lesson learned. You can still be famous, but you cannot claim to be the one who invented the term social entrepreneurship. It's like giving birth to a child, but the child is not carrying your name, so to speak. The problem with this concept of social entrepreneurship is that the word social is so vaguely defined. We all like it. People like it. But we have no idea what it is. It's very unclear and it's very unmeasurable. So that's the confusion associated with much of the discussion on the definition and the theories associated with social entrepreneurship. And early on, Professor Chao from Renmin University gave a comprehensive framework on how to better understand social entrepreneurship. And I really like the model that he proposed in his presentation. What I'm going to do today is rather different. I wanted to provide a more simplified model, which is somewhat different from Professor Chao's effort. I want to focus on something that seems to be widely agreed, and that is the assumption that social entrepreneurship or social enterprises in particular have this dual goal of creating both social and economic value. I think if you review the existing literature, you will understand that the majority of the scholars seems to agree that if you are a social enterprise, you want to pursue both social and economic value. But what is less discussed is what exactly it means by creating social and economic value. And this is actually the focus of my presentation today. I wanted to first clarify what we mean by creating social and economic value in social entrepreneurship, and also what does it mean for performance. Because we all want social enterprises, just like all business or nonprofit organizations, we hope that they can all perform well. But what does it mean by performing well in the context of a social entrepreneurship or social enterprise? So that's a related question. I'm going to propose or present a framework for understanding value creation and capture in social entrepreneurship, and that's the plan for today. Professor Li made it clear that it's important to first define what you're trying to discuss before you discuss it. I fully agree. And if you have 100 scholars on social entrepreneurship in this room, you will have 101 definitions. Everybody has a different definition, and here is a new definition that I provide, not to expect you to agree with my definition, but really to facilitate the discussion that's coming in the next 10, 15 minutes. So we define social entrepreneurship as an organizational level environment. That is, it's similar to how you define social enterprises. We focus on organizations, you can call it social enterprises or social ventures, that pursue the dual goal of social and economic value. So that's the first element of the definition. You have to pursue dual goal of a social and economic value. And two, you do so through the sale of products and services. And I know some scholars have a broader definition that includes any innovative solutions to existing social problems. They regard this as social entrepreneurship. On a conceptual level, I tend to agree, but for the purpose of this discussion, I want to be more specific. Unless your organization provides services and or products on the market for sale, you do not qualify as a social enterprise or social venture according to my definition. And also, your organization more or less operates in a competitive market. That is, there are competitors. You are competing with others in the provision of products and services on the market. So that's my definition. With that definition, we all know that it comes a wide variety of different kinds of social enterprises or social ventures, and Professor Chao and Professor Yuan have both offered different ways of a social enterprise that can be created or can be operating. And there are different options too. Dennis Young, in his presentation tomorrow, will talk about the social entrepreneurship zoo that contains a lot of different animals. And one of the popular hybrid spectrum that has a number of different kind of organizations that can qualify as social entrepreneurship or enterprise. But my definition seems applicable to the four types of organizations that are listed in this spectrum. So at the core, we see social enterprise with a narrowly defined social entrepreneurial organization and socially responsible businesses. My definition would apply to these organizations. But if we lose the assumption a little bit, we could actually use my idea to discuss nonprofits with income-generating activities as well as corporations practicing CSR. But the focus is on the narrowly defined social enterprises that sell products and services on the competitive market. As I mentioned, performance is a problem. We do not know how to clearly define or measure performance in social entrepreneurial ventures or social enterprises. Here's I propose. In order to understand performance, we need to consider three elements. The first element is economic value created by an organization. This is based on the concept of value in the economics literature. The idea is not a market price. It's not how much you sell your product or service on the market. It's what the maximum value, the maximum amount of money that the customer or buyer is willing to pay in order to get the product or service that you provide, you sell. And for a social enterprise, the economic value you create, or you exist to create some sort of economic value. You have to create value. But the definition of economic value created is, well, it equals to the buyer's willingness to pay minus seller's cost. If you produce something that sells less than the cost produced, then you are having trouble. You're not creating any value, or you're creating negative value. But in addition to creating economic value, a social enterprise must also capture at least some of the economic value that you create, because otherwise you will not be able to survive. That's the sustainability element that Professor Chao is mentioned in his presentation. And on top of that, we all agree that social enterprises need to generate social value. And by social value, I define it as the increase in the aggregate utility of society's members after accounting for the economic value creation. I know it sounds confusing, but here's a better presentation. It's more visual. As you can see, the whole value that a social enterprise creates includes three elements. At the core is the economic value captured by the organization. And that's essentially the profit margin, or net revenue, whatever you call it. That is really the market price minus the cost of producing that product. And then, on top of that, you have the economic value created by the organization but not captured by the organization. And then on top of that, you have the broader social value created by the organization, which in most cases cannot be measured. So, from the econ perspective, this is really far. The room is larger than I expected, so I cannot really point it to the chart here. So for a social enterprise, you have to pay for the raw material, facilities, whatever. So that's the economic cost that has to happen before you can produce the product or service. And then you sell the market at a certain sell it on the market for a certain price. The buyer's willingness to pay is usually higher. The buyer is usually is willing to pay more than it actually pays. So in summary, economic value creation, according to my framework, equals A plus B. That is the A box plus the B box. The B box is really the profit margin of selling the products or services, and usually it's also called the producer's surplus if you study economics. And then area A is the consumer's surplus. So when we talk about creating economic value, we're talking about the combination of both the consumer and the producer surplus. So that's for any for any business, including social enterprise, that is the value you create. That's the economic value you create on the market. And the green area is the value you capture within the organization. You keep as the organization. And as you can see, there are a couple of things here interestingly. One is that so far I have not talked about a social value creation yet. And two, I haven't really talked about how you go about creating economic and social value in this particular situation. And here's another diagram that helps to understand this. As you can see clearly, if you want to create, assuming that you want your business to be sustainable, that is, you want to at least have a relatively healthy profit margin. You don't have to maximize it, but you need to sacrifice it. That is, you need to have a good amount of profit margin to keep in your organization. Then you have two strategies that you can see from this diagram. You can either increase the buyer's willingness to pay, or you lower the cost of producing the product or service. There are no other ways. Just two very basic ways of creating how much value you can capture in your organization. But what's social about it? What's social value? What is social value? We haven't talked about it. I'm going to give you two examples of how social value is embedded in those two strategies. Strategy one is to lower the cost of producing a product or service. That's essentially a cost leadership strategy if you study business strategy. But for social enterprises, What do they do? In most cases, it's very interesting. Here is a non-profit, is an interesting example. Fair and Square is a non-profit supermarket. And how is that a social enterprise? And what's the social value in it? The whole idea is that they have a social mission first. The mission is to actually address the issue of a food desert. That is a neighborhood or community where people have no easy access to affordable and healthy food options. It's a new supermarket, in one word. Because the market is not large enough for business organizations to go in. People don't want to do it. The supermarkets don't want to go in because they cannot make money. Then how do you do that? What a non-profit supermarket, which is a social enterprise, what it does is to lower the cost of the raw materials, the items that you purchase from the suppliers in order to sell in the market. But how they do it? I interviewed the founder of this non-profit supermarket, and he told me that the way they did it was to negotiate with the suppliers to lower the market, the price, the suppliers' price, so they have a lower cost coming in. And then they sell the items, the vegetables and food supplies, at the customers at a lower price, 15% lower usually on the market. So that's a cost leadership strategy. As you can see, social value is clearly a core element in how they are able to negotiate with suppliers. They're able to do it. The suppliers are willing to provide a lower price to them because they're treating nonprofits similar to what they treat a military base or something. So that's generally how they reduce the supplier's price. The second strategy is increase the buyer's willingness to pay, which is essentially differentiation. And how you do it? There are plenty of examples. You can see fair trade coffee, green food, organic food. They're usually expensive, but they expect you to they expect you to be willing to pay more because you care about the environment, you care about the farmers in the disadvantaged communities. But the interesting example I'm providing here is somewhat different. It's called 喜憨儿洗车中心. It's a car wash. But what's different is that they have a social mission to address. The social mission is to address the well-being of China's mentally disabled. And how they do it is to employ the mentally challenged individuals to serve as employees in those car wash facilities. And as you can see clearly, that's how they incorporate social value into the broader strategies of creating and retaining capturing economic value. So that is the general framework I'm presenting, and I hope that you find it useful. And I just finished it this morning. So this is very fresh, very different from what I had in the book. But I do hope that I can get feedback for you guys. Thank you very much.